Great, thanks Lucy. So in the second half, Mottle and I are going to talk through the ARENA application assessment process in a little bit more detail. So I guess we just wanted to start off by highlighting some of the really useful materials that are on our website that should hopefully help you navigate our application process. The first one is the Advancing Renewables Program Guidelines. So all projects will be funded within the ARP program, and so those guidelines are really helpful because they set out sort of the process and the requirements underneath that. Hopefully you've already seen the short-term funding announcement on the website, and that contains a lot more specific detail around this particular funding announcement, like the timelines, the activity scope, and the sort of project attributes that we're looking for. It's really important to note that all applications will be submitted on the web via ArenaNet. So you can go onto the website, sign up, create a login, and have a look at what the application form looks like. You know, our advice would be look at that sooner rather than later, just to get yourself familiar with what that looks like, and you know, the word limits associated with the various questions, that sort of thing. So in terms of our assessment process, we have a two-stage assessment process, and we'll look through some of the key steps of that shortly. But it's basically an EOI followed by a full application, where it's the same process for both, just a bit more detail for that full application. We also have 7 eligibility criteria, which must all be met to proceed to the merit assessment. And Mottle's going to talk through what those eligibility criteria are. Mottle will also kind of go into a bit more detail on the merit criteria. We've got 5 and they're all equally weighted. You will have seen in the short-term funding announcement some information on how you can demonstrate high merit against those criteria. And I guess throughout the assessment process, ARENA staff might identify some low merit applications, and then we'll stop the assessment process at that point. And our external advisory panel also help with that assessment process. I guess important to note that we're taking a portfolio approach to the assessments. That means that we'll look at how each of the projects contributes to achieving the broader program outcomes, or how they may sit as part of a set of complementary projects. So that may mean that if there are similar projects, we may decide not to fund all of those projects. Some of you may have seen that we've done competitive rounds in the past, and this is not a competitive round where we numerically assess the projects against criteria. And as always, we're looking for value for money. So Mottle will talk a little bit more about that, but basically we're looking for the minimum amount that the government is putting in to help achieve the project outcomes. So if we just have a look, we've got a bit of a flow chart here that talks about the main steps in the application process. The first step is really going online to ArenaNet, where you fill out your EOI and submit that. We then receive that application and we do an eligibility assessment. We will, I guess, notify you if for some reason your project is deemed to be ineligible. Otherwise, all eligible projects then proceed through to the merit assessment process. We will have our panel of external experts who will evaluate the projects. Each project will be evaluated against those 5 criteria that are weighted equally. And those ones that are deemed to be of high merit will be considered for invitation to a full application. Our CEO or our CFO will then approve the high merit applications that are requested to come through to a full application. And we will notify all applicants at that point if there are any requirements that the assessors would like to see addressed in that full application. So then the full application process is very similar to the EOI. Again, you go online and you submit via ArenaNet. It'll be the same information, just a lot more detailed, for example, providing a more detailed financial model or project plan, as your project will hopefully have evolved during that process. We'll then go through the same eligibility process and then through into a similar merit assessment process. I guess at this point, we'll also go back to our external advisory panel, and we may look to do some additional I guess, follow-up or collaboration with you to understand a little bit more about the project. That may mean requesting some due diligence or consulting with technical aspects if there is a particular area of the project that we want to look into in a bit more detail. So those applications that are considered to be of highest merit will then be recommended for funding or go through for board or CEO approval. And it's ultimately the board or the CEO who will make a decision about those projects that get funded. If approved, we'll then send out a letter to offer to negotiate with those successful applications. And then we'll start talking to you about a funding agreement or a contract. And then once that contract is successfully negotiated and signed, that's the point really when the commitment from ARENA becomes kind of final and legally binding. So I think Motto will just go through now some of the eligibility criteria.
Thank you, Zoe, and welcome everybody. So just two things I really wanted to focus on just as we kick off this session is that there is an online guide, the Advancing Renewables Program, which is available online, which is an extremely important document to look at as you're preparing your expressions of interest. This will give you detailed explanations of what we expect under each merit criteria and also under the eligibility. And the other document that's really important to focus on is the funding announcement document. So that document sets out some of those additional areas that we'll be looking at when we make an assessment as to the various projects that come in. So just focusing on the eligibility criteria. So we did have a question that came through on the eligible applicant in terms of can a university apply? As you look at that description, a university cannot be the lead applicant. However, they are more than welcome to participate as a participant in a project. So for example, if you had a market semi-scheduled generator as well as a technology solution and a university, that would be more than possible for the university to participate in that regard. So it's a company and the other descriptions that are listed over there. In terms of eligible projects, take a close look at the guide, but we're not here funding research. We're really funding projects that will come out and form the body of work and the evidence for this type of solution. Projects have to take place in Australia as well. And what we've also done is in this, projects that are within the national electricity market will be assessed as they will need to be in the NEM to actually participate. When we think of knowledge sharing item D, this is really where ARENA sees our return on our investment. So we're not always after a monetary return, but we're always after how do we help advance the technologies, advance the market, advance the commercialization of this type of knowledge. So we're really looking for you to put some strong emphasis on knowledge sharing and exactly what that means for your project and how that's going to help with this body of work. Intellectual property at item E, really important that you have either ownership to the intellectual property or you have a licensing agreement or something that allows you to actually use that. We don't want to be funding projects that down the road will have real strong issues about tying up intellectual property and also knowledge sharing. And just more broadly, please take a look at the compliance and other requirements that are set out in the documentation. So just jumping into merit criteria A, I think, as I said before, please take a close look at the Advancing Renewables Program. What we've done at the top right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a small box that says the page reference. So please take a close look at that, which is going to really help you take a look at and really understand what we're looking for in each of these merit criteria. In terms of the actual priorities, we want to make sure that the projects align with ARENA's objectives, and those under the Advancing Renewables Program, and those broadly fall in terms of increasing the amount of renewable energy, decreasing the costs, building the skills and removing any roadblocks that could lead for the advancement of renewable energy. So if you're able to tie your projects to those objectives, that's going to help demonstrate merit as we look at this assessment. At that second bullet point, which we'll discuss shortly, it's really that funding announcement which teases out things which are above and beyond what's listed online in that Advancing Renewables Program guide. when we actually come to making an investment decision, those next three items are really important to us. So the impact, the path to market, we ask ourselves a series of questions which say, how novel or innovative is this project? What's the pathway to commercialization? So we're not just funding one technology now and then it disappears. We really want to make sure that there is a demonstrated pathway, and there's also really a broader market opportunity that exists over here. I mean, it's expected that we're sitting in this room today because we do feel that there is a large market opportunity in this space, but we really want you to show us and demonstrate how your technologies or the approaches that you're taking are going to help accelerate that pathway to commercialization, and how in this first instance, maybe there's a need for ARENA support, but how over a period of time, we're able to reduce that need for ARENA funding or government funding and really make this standard and stock as part of the market. So just jumping on to the next slide in the actual funding announcement objectives. These are some of those extra items that we discussed at the workshop and also just to talk through today. So we really want to improve on the AWEF's and the ACEF's existing forecasting that is being centrally generated. An important area for us is really also understanding what's your approach to validating that? What's your approach to measuring accuracy? Is it accurate when it needs to be accurate? Is it accurate in certain weather conditions? So we really want you to be thinking creatively about what are the biggest hurdles in the market and what's the best way to actually overcome those and really show the performance and the value of your forecast. So as you think through some of these items, it really comes into those next two bullets about the novel aspect of it, the first of its kind aspect of it. And so those things are items that you can really draw out to show and demonstrate merit with respect to other projects. So just on to merit criterion B, this is all about the applicant capability and capacity. So these are two distinct items. It's really about capability, and just to point out quickly at the bottom, a market semi-scheduled generator will make you a higher merit application. So we can't reinforce that enough. If you come to us and say, I've got this great technology and it can create the best forecasts out there, and our approach to validating that is the best in kind, we will look at that, but we really want to see that paired up with a market semi-scheduled generator to enable this live testing of it. So those two aspects that are really there in front of you, capability and capacity. Capability is almost who's your team, what's your skills, what's your track record, how have you looked at the problem in the past, and what are you really proposing, and how does that leverage, I guess, the skill and expertise that you've got. And coming back to the university question, this is where a university could really come in and lend credence and support to a project that they can say, we've got a great best-in-class mathematics division, and they're going to help support the generation of a forecast. Capacity is all about, we've got the resources and the capability to actually deliver this project. So we've got the time and we've got the ability to actually deliver. Merit criterion C, project design and methodology. I kind of like to think of this as, what is your approach to actually designing your project, implementing your project, testing your project, delivering knowledge sharing aspects of your project? And so how measured and considered is your approach? Is it, are you front-ending everything and it's going to be really difficult as you come to thinking about resources and capability? Or is there a real measured approach, systematic way of actually looking at the project? And other key aspects over here is really the risks. And so as you think through what are the risks that could come up in this project, it's not only what are the risks, but it's really the way that you can mitigate those. And that's everything from, is there equipment failure, to is there WHS issues when we're installing kit potentially at a wind farm or a solar farm. And lastly on this page, what we really ask you to think about closely is also cybersecurity risks. This has become, clearly it is a focus area within the market at the moment, and it's something that we want you to be taking a think through, and really what is your approach to that, and how can you help to overcome some of those items as we progress into an actual live demonstration of a project. And just the last thing to flag as well is that there is this online expression of interest form. You are welcome to submit additional information with that as well. And that, because sometimes the actual online form can be a bit cumbersome in terms of putting together a project plan. You are welcome to put together diagrams, as it's noted there, or a Gantt chart, something that really lays out clearly both, we'll call it the technology stack that you're looking at, but also maybe the approach for you actually demonstrating that. Merit criterion D, financial viability and co-funding commitment. So this is what Zoe alluded to before when ARENA looks at value for money when we're looking at a project. So there's really two aspects over here. Firstly, there's just the form and format. So there is a budget table within the ArenaNet application. It can also be helpful if you submit a more detailed Excel spreadsheet that lays out the various contributions of the parties, how that tracks to various levels of expenditure. Feel free to play around with that to see how you can best present your project. We do ask you not to have exact figures at this stage. There is level for variance as you progress between the expression of interest. And we almost expect you to have that, but there has to be within a bounds of reason. And secondly, the justification is all about why do you need ARENA funding to help develop this? So if your technology is ready to go, you may need it for deployment. You may need it. In some instances, you may need it actually to help advance your technology solution, to help build your APIs. And so we really want to see the amount of funding that you are looking to contribute. When ARENA funds projects, we fund up to a maximum of 50%. That's not to say that we fund 50% as a starting point. We really look to size the grant in a way that helps achieve the outcomes. So in effect, you may say we look to minimize the size of the grant required to actually achieve the outcomes rather than call it supersizing the grant, and making sure that that's really appropriate for the funding request. Merit criteria. So as we said before, knowledge sharing for ARENA is really our return on our investment. This is what, it's not our return on our investment, it's really the taxpayer return on the investment, and it's really your return on the investment. So we expect that individual projects will share bodies of knowledge that will help advance the market. As we progress from the expression of interest phase through to the full application, we'll be working with those successful applicants on various aspects of that knowledge sharing, which might include a template form of knowledge sharing that every project has to deliver, but we're also welcoming other applicants and yourselves to really show us better ways of knowledge sharing, unique bodies of knowledge that you may be generating. And so within this, as we said before, each of the merit criteria are really weighted equally. So it's important not to just gloss over knowledge sharing and say, yes, we're committed to knowledge sharing, but it's also, what are you sharing? How does that advance the market? And how does that really help others? And how do we propose to do that in a way that's really going to get the body of knowledge out to, be it regulators, be it to AEMO, to ARENA, to industry stakeholders, customers, and whoever else you think is necessary within this chain. So just on the funding expectations, really tying in with that merit criteria D, there are at least matched funding on a one-to-one basis. I will point you back to the ARENA funding guidelines. There is a whole section there on eligible expenditure and ineligible expenditure. And I understand that there are some people from overseas over here. It's really important to take a look at what is funding that, what's expenditure that ARENA can fund and what's funding that ARENA can't support. And also, so I'd encourage you to take a really close look at that as you think through your budgets and the amount of funding that you're requesting from ARENA. We're happy to take follow-up questions on this. I don't want to get too much into the weeds on this, but I'd encourage you to take a close look at that, start to think through your budgets, and then if you've got specific questions on how you structure what is in-kind funding, what is cash funding, to start coming through and putting that together. The second question really came through on the second bullet is really on the justification. As we said, it's not a 50% grant as a given. It's really important to justify why you need the grant and how that's really valuable in getting your project over the line. And lastly, while there is that cash and in-kind contribution potential, higher cash contribution does equal higher merit when it is assessed. So just before we dive into the timeline, as we said before, really we do look at each of those merit criteria equally weighted. And when we look at those, as Zoe mentioned before as well, there will be that portfolio fit. So you won't be numerically ranked in terms of somebody got an 8 out of 10 and somebody else got a 7 out of 10 as we look against that. But we'll really look at, tease out, if two projects are very similar, we will use those merit criteria to talk through what's the capability and capacity of that team. Have they approached this in a similar manner? What's their knowledge sharing components that really set one apart from the other? So each of those areas are really important to focus on as you prepare your expressions of interest. In terms of timeline, we are working on a fairly rapid and accelerated timeline. This is in part because of the feedback that we got from you in the industry at those workshops to say, let's get this done. So we are looking for expressions of interest to be submitted by close of business on the 9th of May. I'd encourage you to really go in early, even in the coming days, look at the online form and make sure you understand the process, because right at the end it can get quite difficult if you're pushing at that point. Another suggestion may be, as you're looking at that expression of interest form, you can often draft it outside of the ArenaNet application, edit it up over there, and then copy paste it into the ArenaNet online form. It will lose a lot of the formatting, so don't spend too much time on the formatting. You can also, as supplementary material, submit almost what we'd call maybe a business plan or a project plan, which really talks through the technology and some of those key aspects which aren't fully captured in that form. Between the 9th of May and the 14th of June, ARENA staff and the ARENA advisory panel will be looking at your expression of interests, and we will be coming to you by the 14th with the short list of participants that will be invited to submit a full application. That full application will also sit in the ARENA online form, and in that phase we'll be able to work with those participants on aspects like the knowledge sharing plan, tightening up the budget, and getting that alignment around the ARENA objectives. We will be aiming to negotiate with you and in that full application process between June and September. Once we get to that phase, it's really on you as the applicant to really drive the pace. We're really keen to get this done quickly, but it's really on you to drive the pace, both of submitting your full applications and also the negotiation of funding agreements. I won't talk through each of the key links, but it's really important to take a look at each of these documents as you're looking through the preparing your application. The last point there, frequently asked questions. We will be taking the questions that come through today and also those that you submitted online as you registered, and we will be addressing those. We're happy to take some initial questions now. We're just over halfway through. Happy to take initial questions and then post those answers online as well.